So today I thought of sharing two things. One is what I heard last week at a talk or 2 weeks ago. Venerable Ayya Suvira was talking at the Servants of the Buddha, and she mentioned where an instance where the Buddha had told the monks, pointing to some trees, and he had said, "Monks, if those trees had a mind, then the trees too can get enlightened." I thought this was a very powerful phrase. If the trees had a mind, then the trees too can get enlightened. And there are two reasons why I said this. One is to confirm what the Buddha said, that as long as you are a human and you have a mind, you can do this. And second, also to instill in us a feeling of don't delay this too much, because if even a tree with a mind can do this, then, and we haven't done it yet, then we need to do it. And at another place, the Buddha had said, your job is to get enlightened first and fast. And I suppose what he was referring to was the uncertainty in life and how things can change. And right now we are alive and our faculties are working, and we can strive to get this understanding. And in the next moment, all that can change. And we will lose this opportunity. So I think that is therefore important. I was even thinking of making a visual of trees and keeping it in front of me with this statement that if these trees had a mind, then they too can get enlightenment. So that is very, very powerful and very inspiring, because it talks about our ability, our inherent ability to get enlightened. So then comes the next thing I wanted to share. Then why are we not getting enlightened? And last week or the week before, I spoke about how the mind has two qualities: the still, spacious, empty nature where we are aware of what is happening, and the flowing nature of the mind where thoughts are coming through what we experience through the sense doors. So what we see, we think about. What we hear, we think about. What we eat, we think about. What we smell, touch, feel, we think about. And when random thoughts come, we think about those too. So that is the flowing nature of the mind. And I spent the last 2 weeks in doing some walking meditation to observe this still flowing nature of the mind. And what I observed was, so the road that I walk, it ends with the main street, the Gold Road. And as I walk towards it, I can see vehicles passing by. And for me, that was a metaphor of how the road is still and spacious and empty. And there are vehicles passing all the time. And I felt that was just like our mind. And then when I look up and see the sky, you see the atmosphere, which is large and spacious and empty and still. And the clouds passing by, birds flying, the sun rising and going down. Sun has nothing to do with it. It's the way the planet, our Earth moves, but it looks like the sun is rising and the sun is going down again. And the atmosphere is still, it's spacious, and it is empty. And then all of these things, the clouds are moving, birds are flying, the sun is rising, sun is fading away, all those things are happening. So when you start looking at it like that, you see it everywhere. You see it everywhere. It's a quality of the universe itself. And it makes a lot of sense. So I really enjoy these walks where, of course, the walking is not for that. The walking, I'm supposed to be looking inward as to how my thoughts come and go based on what I'm experiencing. So when I'm focusing on walking, my focus is on the feet and the various touch experiences that I'm getting. And to see those experiences come and go as perceptions, as thoughts, while the awareness of it is still and spacious and silent and uh, there's nothing, right? So that was the intent of the walking. But while walking, when the eye sees the vehicles go on the road, based on what you see, you start to think about it, right? And when the eye sees the sky and the birds and the clouds, based on what you see, you think about. So you forget the meditation and you start thinking about things. So that is, of course, a very good example of a very bad meditation. But nevertheless, I thought I'll share this with you for this reason. And throughout the day, I felt quite inspired most of the days to try and look at it in that way. So whenever a thought comes, and that thought makes me feel anxious or alarmed or worried or stressed, then I would think of this and think that, okay, now I am going with the flow, with the flowing nature of the mind. But what I need to do is I need to be with the still, spacious, empty quality of the mind and observe what is flowing. And whenever I remember to do that, I manage to come into a temporary peace. And whenever I didn't remember to do that, of course, I flowed with that feeling of anxiety and whatever that was. So Ayya Khema, who was another very, very renowned meditation master, bhikkhuni, I believe she's of German origin. She came to learn meditation and she ordained as a bhikkhuni and spent, I believe, considerable time, if not the rest of her life, here in Sri Lanka. And she was passed away. So Ayya Khema has also written some really fabulous books. And in one of it, she mentioned that the mind in its original state is quiet, it's peaceful, it's empty, and it's still, it's silent. And these various thoughts and perceptions, they come and shatter that peace. And I would think of this whenever I remembered, and just be aware that, the peace has got shattered. And especially when the thoughts and feelings and emotions are negative. Like, okay, so the peace has got shattered. So I felt that observing this stillness, this spaciousness, this emptiness, and observing this shattering of the peace, usually I remember to do that when the peace is shattered and when I am feeling the weight of it. And then to think of what the Buddha said, that you have only two jobs. You have only one job in the world, and that is to observe. And I felt it like two jobs because I am more conscious of the flow and less conscious of the stillness, the emptiness, the spaciousness. But it was very interesting to look for it whenever I remembered. So this is what I wanted to share. Lastly, there was something that I remembered from a story that we all know. So we all know the Angulimala story, where there was a line that a very famous line of exchange between Angulimala and the Buddha. So when Angulimala was coming after the Buddha with his sword, with his intent to make the Buddha his 1,000th victim, he found that he was running, but he couldn't close the gap with the Buddha. And he tells the Buddha, stop, hey, you, stop. And the Buddha, while walking, says, Angulimala, I have stopped. It is you who needs to stop. And even in his, deranged mind of having already slaughtered 999 people and wanting to complete his task of slaughtering 1,000. In that deranged mindset, still, he paused to think about, reflect about what the Buddha said. And his reflection was, these ascetics, they don't lie. Especially this one is known to not lie. Then how come while walking, he's saying that he has stopped? And I am shouting at him, having stopped. And he's telling me that you are the one who needs to stop. So for him, he was trying to make sense of what he can see in the physical world, that the Buddha was walking. And so there's a bit of what we heard from the stories back then, that there was some, psychic thing happening there, where initially Angulimala was chasing after the Buddha and the Buddha was calmly walking. And Angulimala found that no matter how fast he ran, he couldn't close the gap between himself and the Buddha. That is why he got exhausted and he stopped and he yelled saying, hey, you ascetic, stop. And so he had stopped when he yelled that. And the Buddha was still walking when he said, Angulimala, I have stopped. It is you who needs to stop. So looking at it from his eyes and seeing the physical movement or lack of movement from his side and the physical movement of the Buddha's side, that is what got him thinking these ascetics don't lie, and especially not this one. And that's how he has heard about the Buddha. But then how come he's saying, while walking, while moving, he's saying that I have stopped. And he's looking at me who has stopped, and he's telling me that you are the one who has to stop. What does he mean? So then he asked the Buddha, what do you mean? I don't understand. And then the Buddha says, well, if you are willing to listen, I'm willing to explain. So by that, Angulimala understood that that doesn't mean you are trying to chop my head off. You have to put these things away. So he puts his weapons away and he says, I am willing to listen. And then the Buddha explains, I have stopped desire. I have stopped aversion. I have stopped ignorance. And therefore, I have found peace. In your case, desire is overrunning you. Aversion is overrunning you. Ignorance is overrunning you. You are a long way from any peace. So this was what he meant. And he goes on to explain, I suppose, because the rest of it I have not come across in the story, because as any story value, the story value was in this part and not in the real gem of a thing that the Buddha would have gone on to then explain to Angulimala. I'm just assuming, given that the Buddha's discovery was of the two qualities of the mind, I'm just assuming that he would have gone on to explain that, because that is the piece, that is the big news here. So what I'm thinking is he would have gone on to explain that, look, Angulimala, there are these two qualities in mind. One part is where is the awareness, where you are aware of everything that you are experiencing and perceiving and so on. And the other part is where it's the perception itself and all of that. Okay. So I think let's pause here and see what questions we have. So I was talking about how the Buddha may have spoken about to Angulimal, how he would have explained it is to say that, you know, the mind has these two qualities. One quality is this whole silent, spacious, empty state of awareness, where it's just an awareness of everything that's happening, and everything that's happening is only through the six sense doors: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, body, and mind, thoughts and emotions. And whatever we experience, we have a perception about it, and we start thinking about it, and those thoughts are what are like the clouds that flowing through the atmosphere, and so on and so forth. So and then the job we have is to be on the awareness side and not on the flowing side. So this is where Venerable Ajahn asked his asked once the people who were assembled, have you seen still water? And then of course people say, yes, we have seen still water. Then he asked, have you seen flowing water? Yes, we see flowing water. Then the question is, have you seen still flowing water? And that is when people get baffled. So what he was referring to was that in the mind you have both the stillness because of the awareness and the flowing nature, and being able to stay in the stillness and observe the flowing nature. Usually what happens is we get carried with the flowing nature and we forget to observe. So the Buddha clearly saw the problem that humans are facing in the world today. The problem is ignorance. Due to ignorance, we don't see this duality of the mind, these dual qualities of the mind. And because we don't see that, we get caught in the flow and we think we are that flow. Because we don't see this duality, because we don't see the job as being just observing what is flowing, we get caught up in the flow and we start to believe that we are the flow. So I am seeing, I am hearing, I am tasting. So something very interesting I heard, again, I think at one of the talks. So there are many talks that I listen to, so sometimes I miss where I heard it. And I try to refer to the person who was saying it so that if somebody's interested, you can go and listen to these things. So this duality, and when you think of the conventional world and reality, right? So you see the reality when you are observing things from the awareness point of view and observe how things are flowing. That is when you start seeing reality. The conventional world that we live in is, give me a second. So I was talking about the duality, this duality of the conventional world and the reality. Somebody mentioned in one of the talks I was listening to that the middle path is being able to balance this duality. The middle path is about exactly this. That is really knowing that you don't exist as a permanent entity. That is what this is all about, right? Through Vipassana, and logically we can see that when we talk about we are made of tiny particles, and these tiny particles are changing at such rapid speed that if you're trying to pinpoint to your body and say, this is me, which particle can you pinpoint? You can't, because one is they're too small. Second is they change so fast. They rise, change, pass away so fast that before you can even point at a particle, the particle is gone. So there is no particle you can show as me, myself, I, but rather it's a flux. So the notion of a permanent entity, because our eyes, when we look in the mirror, we can see, when we look at our body, we can touch our body, we get a feeling that here there is a permanent person. This person was there from my childhood. This person is me. I remember my childhood. I remember growing up. I remember up to this age. And I project the future years also I'll be living. So we are occupying time. And we are occupying space because my body needs this space, this house, the size of the body, the house I live in, the city I live in, the country I live in. So through a permanent notion, we occupy time and space. Whereas, so that's in a conventional term. And in that conventional terms, there is a name, I have a name, I have a house, I have a car, I have a child, I have a spouse, I have a job, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. Everything about mine, these are mine, these belong to me. That whole notion comes from this misunderstanding of a permanent entity. So as we see reality and understand that there is no permanent entity, but a rapidly changing flux of physical matter, mind and body matter, because the mind, if you think the body is changing fast, the mind is changing even faster, so fast that at least in the body, the particles, they rise, change, pass away. In the mind, the consciousness only rises and passes away. There's not even a moment for it to change. It's rising, pass away, very fast. So what we see as me, myself, I is actually a combination of this rapidly rising and passing away things, a combination of material and mind. So it's a flux. And is there an entity? There is a changing flux of things. The moment you try to say there's an entity, you give itself some permanent notion to it. And that permanent notion then goes on to build an empire around it. And where you start getting hugely attached to things through desire or aversion. You get really attached based on how you see things, my view. These are things I like, these are things I don't like. So this whole duality comes in, first and foremost, through experiential wisdom, understanding that I do not exist, not in the way that I have misunderstood it before. And then to understand, but for conventional reasons, I need to use these terms, and being able to balance it out. For us, as Pruthajjanas, we are purely in the conventional state because we believe it. We believe it to be true. And the reality is just a theory, just something up there, which we are starting to resonate with, starting to make sense. But most of the time, we are here in this convention, deeply believing in this entity, in this notion, which has created an ego of self. And whenever we are unhappy and dissatisfied, that is when we are looking at it from a selfish point of view. Then there's a self, and when you are having an agenda, that becomes selfish, and all of our unhappiness, dissatisfaction, all of it is arising from that. So this goes on to the reality that the Buddha saw was, one is this duality that we do not exist, but we misunderstand ourselves to exist. And that misunderstanding of the self is one. So to be able to see the reality, understand the reality, but also to exist in the conventional state. So for practical reasons. So that middle part, that being able to balance it. And then to really understand the impermanence, and not from, oh yes, I know things are impermanent because over a long period of time, I see things change. But to understand that right now, in this moment, things have changed already, to understand that speed of impermanence, that the hugeness of that impermanence, that is creating actually the non-self, that emptiness. And to understand that everything about life fundamentally is a dissatisfaction, because even in those fleeting moments of satisfaction, they are so fleeting. The Buddha rounds it off and says that it's so small, you can round it off to say that actually life is dissatisfying. And that makes a lot of sense. So this is why he said there are three characteristics of life, and that's the reality of life, and that is everything is changing at a very rapid speed. There's really nothing satisfying. Everything is highly dissatisfying, and there is really no permanent entity enjoying these things. And when we believe there's a permanent entity, then we see non-self as a permanent entity. We see the dissatisfying nature of life as a satisfying thing, and we look forward to enjoying life more, enjoy more and more, which is what this whole commercial life is based on. The whole wheels of commerce is based on this, enjoy more and more. And therefore the whole ignorance, where in reality there is no self, things are changing very rapidly, and everything in life has an underlying theme of dissatisfaction. We see a permanent entity who is enjoying life. There's a lot of things to be satisfied about. And yes, things are changing, but right now, everything is fine, everything is perfect, and nothing is changing right now. So that is the illusion that is binding us and causing a lot of issues. So this is what the Buddha realized when he became enlightened. And this is why he said, if those trees had a mind, even the trees can get enlightened, because if you have a mind, it's about understanding these two qualities of the mind, the stillness and the flowing nature, and to understand that in the stillness is the peace. And when you get caught to the flow, that is when you lose the peace. So as a practical thing, what we can do is to start observing this and to know that in the stillness you are peaceful, and in the flow you are not, and to recognize when you are in the flow, and to recognize when you are in the stillness. And this is the practice. So let me pause there and see what we have in terms of questions. All right, so that was a really great reflection. And what was shared in the reflection was that the whole part about how satisfaction can be very fleeting. And the example used was a chocolate, and I really liked that because I was a huge chocolate fan. So, so here, one of the listeners shared how when you eat a bit of a chocolate, and if you really are mindful and observe, just a little bit before eating the chocolate, you are not happy. A little bit after eating the chocolate, you are not happy. And the happiness of eating the chocolate is for very, very momentary. It's very fleeting. And generally, we are not observant, we are not mindful, so we don't realize this. And we are in the flow generally. And therefore, we associate a lot of joy in it than it is actually giving. So if you really try to measure the utility part of it, it's very little compared to the effort that needs to be put in. And this is what the Buddha mentioned once, that when you compare the effort you have to put in to gain that fleeting happiness or satisfaction, and if you round it off, it's almost like the happiness does not exist, and it's just the effort only. So that is a big piece. And now, how come when you look at our population of 7 billion people, they are mostly going about in their life blissfully unaware of this. So one is they have not heard about it, because even though this teaching is available for the last 2,600 years, it is not explicit in this manner. It refers to many, many other things. And this kind of thing being explicitly being referred to, I have come across only now, in my 50 years on this planet. So that just shows that even though the teaching was there, it is not referred to, and maybe popular culture never made it interesting or attractive in the past, that it just was never referred to. But now, thankfully, a lot of erudite monks and scholars are talking about this, and that is how we come across these things. So that is very, very important. And this whole duality of the mind, where this anxiety, worry, and the mind moving, is very natural. And so today morning, for example, I happened to wake up well before the alarm goes, and whenever that happens, you're faced with the choice of going back to sleep or doing something about it. So today I was thinking, let me try and meditate. Since I just naturally woke up and there is time, let me meditate, because that has always been an intention of mine, that I would like to start the day with meditation. Now, prior to meditating, there were some things that just came to my mind about what I need to do today and tomorrow and day after. And I thought, okay, let me just make a note of it. So I started making a note of it. And in that process, a good 10-15 minutes went, where I went from family-related matters that I made notes of things to do, to work-related matters that I made notes, and then other some things. And it was such a muddle, like a real a tangled ball of string. And at the end of that 10 minutes, I was like, my goodness, this mind is like full of stuff. And how the mind moves, and each time the mind moves, how that stillness gets shattered. And this still mind is referred to as an illuminated mind. This still mind is referred to as the nirvanic state. And the ability to let the stillness be is the skill that one gains when one gets enlightened. And right now, because we don't have that skill, we get carried away with the thoughts that come in, and then you actually can see how tiring that is, and how restless and tiring and muddled and messed up that is, versus that stillness. And in that 15 minutes, did I solve all my problems? Absolutely not. I just got worked up about it. And even though, okay, putting it down as something to do later probably helped. But I remember once when somebody asked a monk, you tell us that no point spending time in the future, but what about planning? And then this monk said, yes, but you don't need to plan the whole day. You can schedule it so that when you're having your morning coffee, you use that time to plan. Or when you are ready to close down for the day, you use 15 minutes or so to plan. But the problem with planning is when it is happening throughout the day. Throughout the day, it only leads to anxiety, restlessness, feeling burdened, and feeling muddled and confused. And today I was thinking that is true, because in the morning, in that fresh morning start, planning the day was the last thing I should have done, because that left me muddled and confused and feeling anxious, actually. When you think of all the things that you need to do, there is a feeling of anxiety that comes with it. There's a feeling of worry that comes with, what if this doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? Then I need plan B and plan C, and oh my God, and all of those things. So there was another story that I would like to share. inspired by this discussion we just now had. And that is, so this is the rain retreat time, right? And this is something our patron, servants of the Buddha, has a patron, Venerable Vajrarama Jnanasiha Thero. So this Thero mentioned to us that during a similar rain retreat, during the times of the Buddha, some monks went to spend it in a place where they were looked after by an upasika, a lady disciple. And she was curious about what the monks were going to meditate on, because usually when a monk goes to a rain retreat, they go with a meditation object. And she was curious about what it is. So the monks, they gave her the same instruction that the Buddha had given them. And they told her how to practice. So they were practicing about the 32 impurities of the body. And so she learned it well, and she practiced diligently. And before long, she got to the third level, that is the Sovan, Sakudagami, Anagami, Arihat, if you think of it as 4 levels. She got to the third level of mental development, Anagami. And through her mental development, she also obtained some level of psychic ability. And her ability was being able to read others' minds. So when she was dutifully serving the monks who were in the rain retreat, she one day just checked, using her psychic ability, whether the monks were enlightened, because she felt, she as a layman, she progressed to Anagami stage. She felt these monks who didn't have all the burdens and attachments of lay life are probably having a better opportunity to progress directly to enlightenment. So she happily investigated whether the monks were already enlightened, and she was surprised to see that they were still Prathajanas. They hadn't progressed at all. And she was thinking, this is not possible. How can this happen? And then she thought that maybe something is holding them back. And she used her psychic powers to see what seems to be the problem. And she realized that these were young monks, about 25, 30 young monks. And she realized that they were not getting enough nourishment. They were hungry. Most of the time they were hungry. And the hunger was getting in the way. The Buddha had mentioned once that hunger is a disease. And that is why he said, when before you try to preach the dhamma to somebody, make sure they have food to eat, because hunger is like a disease. And then she felt really bad, and she did her best to provide them with the quantities of nourishment that they need. And she was right in her assessment, because very soon, with the right nourishment, the monks, they actually got enlightened. And she was right in her judgment that for people who have actually less burdens and more time to spend in the practice, there is a faster route to enlightenment. And she was right. And it was the food, lack of sufficient food, that was hindering their progress. So the monks returned to their original monastery, and they usually, when monks return from a rain retreat, they go to give an update, and they gave an update to the Buddha that the lay disciple was very advanced, and she learned and practiced faster than us, and she gained good mental development and psychic powers, and as a result, she could actually help us by understanding what was holding us back. And through kindness and compassion, she helped us. And we owe so much to her for her generosity and her kindness. So another monk, having heard this, a protection monk, having heard this, he, unenlightened, I suppose, he felt, okay, that is good. Then I must go there, because to have a person helping like this is very useful, and then I can just focus on my meditation. So he took permission from the Buddha, and he went, and of course the Upasika was very happy to support him, and he started meditating in the same place that the other monks were meditating. However, now that he knows that the Upasika can read minds, he became very agitated because we all know what our minds are like, right? And we hardly can say that it's always pure thoughts, right? In fact, it's the opposite. I often think when I think of the 31 planes of existence that we have heard of in the sutras, the below planes, which are the hellish realm and the asura realm, and then the preta realm, and then finally the animal realm, and then the human realm. And I often think whenever I come across, which is quite frequent, whenever I come across unwholesome thoughts and unsuitable thoughts, like where is this all coming from? And I'm thinking that no wonder humans are struggling to be good and wholesome when there's so much of rubbish in the system already, and no wonder with births after births of spending time in those other bottom layers of the realms, it's no wonder that there is so much. So for this young monk also, that was the thing. So thoughts would come up, and he would feel ashamed and embarrassed, knowing that the lady looking after him would also know these things. So he felt ashamed, he felt embarrassed, and he just couldn't stick with the meditation. He returned and he told the Buddha, I can't. The lady is very nice. She's very generous. In fact, I would think, oh, I would like a soup today, and then I get a soup. Or I would think, oh, I would like this kind of food today, and I'll get that kind of food. So it confirmed to me that she can read the minds. And then when other thoughts are coming to my mind, I just felt I couldn't take it anymore to be there and for her to know what is going on in my mind. And then the Buddha said, giving up is the easy thing, but what you should do is you should go back and put your effort in controlling your mind. Put your effort in controlling your mind. So be very, very vigilant. And whenever something unwholesome, unsuitable pops up in your mind, you take the right effort. You take the right effort to get rid of it, right? And in under Samma Vayama of the Eighth Noble Path, the Buddha explains often how to do this, right? So he says, when you're observing your mind, if you observe that wholesome thoughts have come, then what you need to do is you need to develop them further. But if you notice that unwholesome thoughts have come, what are unwholesome thoughts? So let's say an anger has come. Then you need to first get rid of it. So how to get rid of anger? That is through loving kindness. Right? So let's say a thought of jealousy has come in. How do you get rid of jealousy? You can think of a blessing, bless the person um, who the source of jealousy was. Or if you have a desire has come for something, that you want something, you can reflect on impermanence, and soon that desire will fade away. So that is how you put effort when unwholesome things have come to your mind. And once that unwholesome thought has left, you can then cultivate wholesome thoughts with the intention of preventing those from coming back. So this is called the right effort. So he said, apply right effort and get hold of your mind, get control of your mind. And that will also aid your meditation. So with this new instruction and the new belief and confidence in himself, the monk went back and he did exactly that. Whenever he realized some unsuitable or unwholesome thought has come up or is occupying his mind, he took the right effort to get rid of it, to discard it, and to protect the mind. And as a result, he soon got enlightened. So why I'm saying this is because we just now in the discussion on Q&A, we're talking of this duality of the mind when we are in the flow and when we are in the stillness. So when we are agitated, when we are feeling agitated, restless, unhappy, then we need to recognize that we are in the flow and try to put the right effort to come to the awareness stage, and from that awareness observe this agitation. That is the task. So let me pause again. So one question I have from the audience is to explain what Ayya Khema was referring to. So she was referring to how the stillness of the mind is the original state of the mind. And this stillness or this awareness, when it is at its purest form, it is without any embellishment, it is radiant, it's illuminating, it's pure. And for us, what happens is the flow, we get caught up in the flow and we start believing we are the flow. We start manifesting it to believe that, you know, it's those thoughts are me and mine, and there's this entity and all of that. And we are completely with the flow and not with the awareness at all. And for very short, fleeting moments, when we are in the awareness, we see the flow for what it is, right? So imagine a state where you are only with the awareness. You're only with the awareness. And that is a state of enlightenment where you are permanently with the awareness and things are coming and going and flowing, and wherever you need to take some action, you can do that because you know to balance the conventional world and you're comfortable with those labels that are required to balance the conventional world. So that is a person who is really walking the middle path, where when there is no requirement to do that, you are in that stillness and things are just flowing and it's not disturbing the stillness. How the stillness gets disturbed is when we get involved with it, when we get entangled with it, when we start engaging, believing that it is mine. So what Ayya Khema was saying is what the Buddha was saying, that enlightenment is there already inside us. It is our misunderstanding of reality that is clouding it. So this is why he said the nivaranas, right? These are things that cloud it. These are things that obstruct it. Yeah. So the whole desires, aversions, restlessness, the lethargic state of the mind, and the doubts that we have, skepticism, all of those things are covering this illuminated original state of the mind. And how does it cover? So desire is shown as colored water. Aversion is seen as boiling water. Lethargic state is seen as moss that covers water, and so on. These are all described. So, but when the water is clear and when it is still, then that whole that you can access that original state of the mind. And that's what we are doing in those moments where we are aware of what is going on, how we are feeling, and those emotions coming and going, thoughts coming and going. We are accessing that original state. And it's just that we don't have the habit to access that full time, right? So enlightenment is where you have developed the habit of accessing it a lot, and one day you know how to be there full time, and you know how to be in that conventional world for practical reasons, for necessities. Right now we are in the conventional world because we believe in it, because we believe it is real. But an enlightened being knows that the conventional world is not real, but he or she knows to be in it for practical reasons. And that ability is the middle path. That ability is the middle path, because in that conventional world, you eat, you sleep, you dress, you shower, right? And while there are the sensorials of it, to understand that there's no permanent entity here who is enjoying these things. There's no permanent entity here to get attached to these things and to want more and more of it. That is a very delicate place. And that is possible when we cultivate this ability, this habit to stay in that awareness. So what Ayya Khema was saying is, the mind in its original form, it's illuminating, it's pure, it is stable, it is still, it is spacious, it is empty. And this original form gets, this peaceful state gets shattered when sense impressions come. The sense impressions comes from sight, from sound, from smell, from touch, from taste, and from thoughts. The sense impressions come and shatter that peace. Whereas for enlightened persons, the sense impressions come. Of course, the sense impressions come, but they do not shatter the peace, because the person has really mastered the art of being with the awareness and not getting caught in the flow. So something really valuable was said that, when we start the day, we just jump into that flowing state and we run after our things to do list and various things we have to do and so on. And this whole skill is in practicing. So this is why many monks say that you need to start the day with meditation and you need to end the day with meditation. So my first meditation master, Venerable Homagama Konnanyatero, he would be very precise about this, because for a lot of people, even if you check in the internet, the one question is, how much should you meditate? How long should you meditate? And generally, there is no time commitment that is set. So generally it says that, about 20 minutes a day where you will see really good results for yourself, that you'll become more patient and loving and kind and considerate, and you'll feel peaceful and so on. So Venerable Homagama Konnanyatero was very explicit in this. He said, start with 5 minutes, because people tell me they're busy. Nobody can tell me that they didn't have 5 minutes. They start with 5 minutes until you start to like it and you want to make it a habit, then move to 10, right? And then once you're comfortable with 10 and you like it and you want to move it to then 15 or 20. Gradually, he said, keep doing that until you can gradually meditate for an hour easily, right? It doesn't need to be, I remember when I initially tried to meditate for an hour, it seemed like such an uphill task. It was very, very uncomfortable. It was unpleasant. It was uncomfortable. It was tiring, and you kind of hate it after a while. So this is why he said you gradually build it so that you can comfortably meditate for an hour. And that is true. As you gradually get the practice, your body gets accustomed to sitting in one way, and your mind also gets accustomed to doing what you have to do, and gradually it becomes pleasant. So his advice was 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening for layman. And I do believe that if we do that, there'll be a lot of benefits for us. To imagine, start the day with 10-15 minutes of metta meditation, and you sit for another, let's say, 20 minutes of metta, 20 minutes of sitting and watching this stillness and the flow. And the last 20 minutes, you do a bit of gentle walking and keep watching the stillness and the flow. That sounds like a perfect meditation, right? Some might prefer to just do one thing, and if you feel like today I just want to do metta meditation, or today I want to just observe this, or today I want to just walk, that is fine. And that is how we start a practice.